This is Christine Clapp from Spoken with Authority, and today I'm here with three of my expert coaches to talk about how to take the content of an in-person presentation and to adapt it to a virtual or online context. To start off, let's hear from Dr. Jean Miller about how you would transition content from in-person to virtual.
Thanks, Christine. I think the first thing is to say is that the basic foundation of how to make an effective presentation in terms of content still holds true. You want to be clear, concise, and concrete. And I think those issues are just elevated in the virtual realm. People's attention and our hunching over the computers and being on all day means conciseness is key. And I do think the sandwich structure is helpful to getting us to do that, and also to doing the one thing that maybe we could look at as a little bit different in the virtual realm, and that is the importance of chunking that content. So I have found that the sandwich structure has been useful to me in doing a half-day training program, in doing classes that range from an hour and a quarter all the way to the 3-hour mark, and also in coaching people about running meetings online, because a lot of what a lot of us are doing now is not the formal presentations, but it's running the meetings. For me, I have found using the sandwich structure is a great way to simply not forget what I need to accomplish in that short amount of time. I had one class where afterwards someone emailed me and said, "What about this topic?" And I realized it was a separate set of slides that I completely forgot to address that day. So I had missed my sandwich structure that day. So it's a way of chunking the content so that we can have that little bit of discussion that we might have, and then our activity or our example, and know where effective times for breaks might be. Because part of this is reading the room, so to speak, remotely, and knowing I have this content area, I want to go to this next one, people are getting a little restless, this is a good time for a short break. And so just seeing it laid out on the sandwich structure, I found is helpful to that sort of chunking process.
Yeah, Jean, thank you so much for talking about the breaking up of material or chunking. We do have our sandwich structure method, which works really well for thinking about a presentation. And like you mentioned, it's a tool that can be used anything from a meeting or a quick update that you're giving on a phone call to something that's more formal, and even a half day or full day of training, just to conceptualize all of your ideas and how it fits in and flows together so that you keep everything in that you need and you remove everything that you can. And for the virtual, you really have to be ruthless about what you leave out, because I think one of the biggest things that we have to battle with virtual presentations is Zoom fatigue. And whether you're using WebEx or Teams or Zoom, that constant tiredness and fatigue that we get, that's so much more online than it is in person. So having really thoughtful analysis of, this is what I'm going to talk about, these are my goals for the presentation, and where in this day or where in this meeting can I work in opportunities for interaction, I think is a really, really savvy way to use it. Not to say that it's a bad idea for in-person, because you should, for a longer presentation, we should definitely have that interaction as well. But I think in a virtual presentation or virtual meeting, you have to do more of an interaction to keep people engaged with you and to help combat the Zoom fatigue. So thank you for talking about how you might use the sandwich structure to accomplish that.
Sure. And I think that having those boxes in the sandwich structure, you can make sure I have something interactive or a concrete example in each of the boxes.
Yep, exactly. And I do think that it could be even a video clip, or if you're giving, for example, if you're leading a pitch, I would think about, is there someone on the team who could do the first main point, and someone who could do the second, and someone who could do the third, because you get a new voice and a new face. And when people have that change in a virtual environment, it helps them recenter and refocus. So I think even And I'm not a huge fan of going back and forth between two speakers where it's ping pong, but having a more consistent flow where the change of speaker can help emphasize the movement of main ideas in a presentation. It might be another way even to think about it, but it is really important to really have top of mind how do you keep people from zoning out, which is so much easier in a virtual setting.
I'd like
Lisa,
to,
yeah,
if
go
we
ahead,
could,
Lid.
I'd like us to also talk about the actual physical setup for people and things that people can rehearse or practice with, because some people may want to actually print out their sandwich structure or their notes and have it in a certain place in their setup, whether it's on their desk, being sure that they don't have it on top of their speakers so that they can be heard. These are things that you don't necessarily think about until you are in this sort of until you're in this sort of environment. And the other possibility, of course, is to have it on your screen. But where do you have it on your screen? And where do you have it so that you can still have appropriate eye contact, kind of read the room, but have your structure with your notes so you can keep track of your chunks in front of you. So can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good point. And we do discourage speakers from having their notes or their sandwich structure outline on their lap or on the desk or on the keyboard because, again, it's going to cause you to look down and people see the top of your head. So it's harder to have that engagement you get from making eye contact with the camera. You want to have it closer to the camera, either on your screen, or I'm a fan of printing it out and taping it up on the wall behind you. Or if you don't have a wall behind your computer, using a lamp or using a box to tape it up somewhere that you can see it easily. I also like that analog version of printing it out if you have access to a printer or just using a piece of paper and writing it out, because with everything technological, there's a chance that it goes away in your computer or you can't see it or can't access it. So having it in paper is a big bonus. The other thing that we recommend for folks who are doing updates in meetings, so something that might be shorter or responding to questions in a Q&A, and you want to have some answers prepared for some likely questions or some really difficult questions, is to put some post-it notes on your computer around the edge like a peacock, so that when someone asks you that question, you could take a quick glance and then look back in the camera and go over the couple words or phrases that you have written down. So like Jean said, you don't forget something that you were wanting to say. But what else do y'all recommend in terms of the placement of materials?
One possibility is making sure that you have so few keywords, not having too much on the notes. And then you can use something like a note card and just rest it against the screen so it's easy to move and see the screen when you need to. It's not too far away from the camera as long as you're just doing quick glances. So just making sure it's key words and not too much on there allows you to use a smaller frame.
Yep, absolutely. And it gets you out of the habit of reading. The more that's on that sandwich structure, the more we tend to look in it and read it rather than take a glance at it and then look back in the camera or look into the eyes of our listeners in an in-person situation and discuss with them. But that does require rehearsal. It's very hard to do that the first time you say it out loud. Even for someone who's a really experienced and trained speaker, you really do have to say it out loud several times to get that flow and to have that crispness of the outline, but it does lead to overall a better delivery. Lisa, did you have any suggestions on placement or how to transition the sandwich structure outline or content from in-person to virtual?
I do. So there's sort of, I see threads kind of weaving through the whole conversation. I go back to, well, so just the notion of the sandwich structure itself, and we've talked a lot about how are we going to use that as presenters, as speakers, as a tool that lets us feel grounded and remember where we want to go and chunk our information. And the reason that we care about that is that we care about what happens for our audience. We're doing that so that what we deliver to our audience is as effective as it can be. And that takes me within the sandwich structure to how important the preview is always, but I think especially in a virtual environment, because we do burn out, we do tune out, we have possibly because of these environments, maybe we're not using the same kinds of visuals. I can't gesture at my whiteboard or pull up my different slides. And so my audience is that much more likely to be counting on me to guide them through. So I know the sandwich structure, but I want you to feel it. And so as a presenter, to have a really clear preview that says, this is why we're here, this is why you should care, this is what it's going to look like. We're going to do this, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to wrap it up with this. And so I'm in the audience, have that in my head. I know what to expect. And then those transitions, Christine, that you're talking about, when we go from one point to the other, if I go back to the way that I initially framed them, I'm really guiding people. I'm kind of holding people's hands through to say, we're here now, we've shifted gears now. And I think it ties together the whole, and it just increases the chances that people stay with you. So I guess that kind of is a piece of all of the different elements of what we're talking about specifically with the sandwich structure.
Absolutely. I think you're 100% right. And we know that people are distracted. We know that they get fatigue. And having that really overt preview of what you're going to talk about is helpful. Even if you're in a meeting and you're giving a quick update or sharing an insight or giving your perspective, when you say, oh, there are 3 reasons why I support moving forward in this way, it helps with the awkwardness of turn taking in a virtual meeting. When you say there are 3 reasons and you articulate first, second, third, then the next person knows not to jump in until you get to the third. Or if you have a culture where people do interrupt you, you could say, oh, I know you're excited to share your rationale. Before we do, I promise the 3 reasons why I think we should support it. Let me give you that third before we move on. And it allows you as a speaker to get back control of the floor before someone else takes control. So I do think the previews are really helpful. I would also add that I think that visuals do have an elevated importance in virtual meetings and virtual presentations. When you have a conversation with a prospective client or with someone you're meeting with in person in a small group, if you were to put up PowerPoint, it would likely cause there to be awkwardness and less rapport than if you were just to have a conversation and maybe pull out a visual here and there to respond to a question or to go over a certain point with them. But in a virtual setting, I think that the visuals can be really helpful and have an elevated importance because, like you said, to go over the structure, if you're leading a meeting, I know my printer, I'm running out of printer ink and I can't buy any. So I'm being really careful about what I print out. And I don't print out meeting agendas as much as I should. A lot of people aren't doing it. So just putting the meeting agenda, here's what we're going to run through. Let me share the agenda with you, or to share it in the chat box as a PDF, or to have a video as an example of what you're talking about, or even if it's not a whole PowerPoint presentation, here's this data that I found. Oh, let me share with you what it looks like. Because that change from seeing my face to seeing the visual gets people re-engaged. It helps them understand. We know when people can not only hear it, but when they can see it. And it can also emphasize the structure of a presentation. So I do think that visuals have an important place. Even if you don't have a PowerPoint presentation that's running the whole time, if you toggle between your face and throwing up a visual every now and again as the meeting unfolds or even a conversation unfolds, can be a really powerful tool to use in online communication situations. Were there any other ideas on how to translate virtual to a virtual setting?
I might just add that one thing I've noticed is in terms of the preview, I find myself in the remote setting giving people, here are the things you will end up with. Here's what you will take away at the end of this session, as opposed to simply, here's the 3 things we're going to cover, or a more broad kind of preview, that giving them real concrete. And that's where I think the concreteness, because we're in this virtual world, everything seems abstract. And so being as concrete as possible. And I was going to mention, about the visuals and the idea of showing video clips. That has been like gold for me in so many things, because people are used to looking at a screen and seeing video. So it feels comfortable, it feels natural, and it's easier technologically to manage in this setting than it can be sometimes in in-person settings. And I've used short clips to really spark discussion, and it's worked effectively for that.
Absolutely. I also agree the same about poll questions. In the past, doing in person, I might use Kahoot or another platform. Slido as a way for audience engagement. That is so easy on most platforms to enter poll questions ahead of time or in the moment, or to ask questions or to get the chat box. I do think that interactivity really lends itself to the platforms, and all of the platforms I think are getting better as we go along in terms of the availability and the user friendliness of some of these tools. Well, I did want to thank my three colleagues, Lisa and Jean and Lynn, for their suggestions today on how to translate content to virtual presentations, and specifically how to use our sandwich structure methodology to help with that. Jean, one of the things that you always come back to as a coach and as a colleague is content is key. You have to have really great content for any presentation to be successful. Sure, you have to rehearse it and deliver it well, but if that content isn't there as the foundation, the bedrock, you have no chance of making it a successful presentation. And this is a great reminder that even when we go to the virtual format, we might not be dressing as formally, we don't have the commute to work, it's less formal in a lot of ways, but it's not an excuse for not preparing your content and taking that time to think about what's going to be helpful to your audience and what's going to give you the most connection with them to achieve the goals, whether it's informative, persuasive, or even to entertain in certain situations. So I just wanted to thank you for always keeping content top of mind, and for everyone's perspective today on how to take content from in-person to virtual presentations.